When I turned onto my street, the world felt wrong. My parking space was taken, the heavy brass nameplate I'd commissioned, the one reading Evelyn, was gone from the gatepost, leaving only 2 empty holes. My mother stood on the porch, her smile brittle. My sister, Chloe, was leaning against a new white car, dangling keys like a trophy. She saw me and her grin widened into a cruel, triumphant smirk. "You don't live here anymore," she announced. To her voice, a sing-song taunt. They expected a scene, but my quiet stillness changed everything. When I turned onto my street, the world felt wrong. My parking space was taken, the heavy brass nameplate I'd commissioned, the one reading Evelyn, was gone from the gatepost, leaving only 2 empty holes. My mother stood on the porch, her smile brittle. My sister, Chloe, was leaning against a new white car, dangling keys like a trophy. She saw me and her grin widened into a cruel, triumphant smirk. "You don't live here anymore," she announced, her voice a sing-song taunt. They expected a scene, but my quiet stillness changed everything. I didn't answer right away. I got out of my car, closing the door with a soft, final click. I let my eyes drift from the missing nameplate to the new, garish curtains in the living room window. They were a hideous floral print, something my mother would choose to prove a point about warmth. "You're back early," my mother said. The cheer in her voice stretched so thin, it was transparent. "The curtains are different," I stated, my voice flat. It wasn't a question. Chloe finally pushed herself off the car, her triumph, making her bold. She jingled the keys, the diamonds on the chain catching the afternoon light. "Bad news." "Genius," she repeated, savoring each word. "You were evicted." They laughed. It was a harsh, rehearsed sound, like a joke they'd been practicing in the mirror. It was the sound of a victory they felt they had earned. My mother's smirk was the final piece of the puzzle. "We sold the house," she announced, her tone a grotesque parody of regret. "We desperately needed the money. To pay off your sister's debts." She gestured toward Chloe, who is now examining her manicure with theatrical boredom. $214,000. To be exact, you were just gone for too long. Evelyn, we had to make a decision. They had a script prepared for this moment. They had blocked out the scene. They were expecting a performance shouting, pleading, maybe even tears that would feed their sense of power. They had not, under any circumstances, prepared for this silence. My quiet stillness began to fill the space between us. A heavy, suffocating blanket that smothered their victory before it could even draw breath. I could see the confusion bloom in my mother's eyes, the way Chloe's triumphant smirk began to falter at the edges. They were armed for a war, but I had refused to even acknowledge the battlefield. This unnerved them more than any screaming match ever could. When I finally looked up from studying the cracks in the driveway, my expression wasn't one of defeat. It was one of cold, detached assessment. I let a smile touch my lips. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a predator's smile, slow and completely devoid of warmth. Chloe took an involuntary half-step back, bumping into the fender of her new car. "When did you finalize the sale?" My voice was calm. My question, not a plea, but an interrogation. My mother, trying to regain a sliver of her lost confidence, puffed out her chest. "Last week, got a fantastic price. 2, cash in hand. The buyer's name was some investment group. I know. I interrupted, my smile widening just a fraction. I recommended them. Their laughter froze on their faces, dying in their throats. The air grew cold. The chill had truly started 6 months ago. The last time we had a family dinner, in an opulent restaurant I paid for with money, I didn't really have to celebrate a promotion I hadn't even had time to enjoy. I remember the scene in excruciating detail. The crisp, white tablecloths, the clinking of expensive silverware, and Chloe, in a brand new designer dress, weeping theatrically into a $20 cocktail. She spun a familiar, threadbare tale of woe-bad investments, bad men, a string of terrible decisions that were always, somehow, someone else's fault. This time, it was a wellness brand that had collapsed, taking a significant chunk of borrowed money with it. My mother reached across the table, her hand covering Chloe's in a gesture of practiced sympathy. "You're a victim. My poor girl. You just trust too easily." She then shot me a look, a silent reprimand for my stoic silence. Evelyn doesn't understand. She's always been cold. But I wasn't cold. I was waking up. I looked at my weeping sister and my enabling mother, and for the first time, I saw them not as family, but as a system, a perfectly balanced ecosystem of manufactured crisis and emotional extortion, and I was its sole resource. The realization wasn't a lightning bolt, but a slow, creeping ice that settled deep in my bones. Love doesn't just blind you. If it's the wrong kind of love, it rots you from the inside out. It turns you into a willing host for a parasite. You keep giving pieces of yourself away, believing you're healing them, when in reality, you're just feeding an insatiable hunger. You're letting them consume you. That night, my mind flashed back to the $40,000 credit card bill of Chloe's I had just paid off. A debt she'd racked up on a spiritual retreat to Bali that produced nothing but Instagram photos. I remembered the endless phone calls, the panicked excuses, the breathless promises that this was the last time, the absolute final time. And as I sat there, listening to the next verse of the same old song, I made a silent, resolute vow to myself. This was it. This was the last time. The emotional bond didn't just fray that night. I took a pair of shears and severed it completely. The first tremor came a month later. I was working late, reviewing some of my personal asset reports, when I noticed strange activity in my digital property records. Access logs from unfamiliar IP addresses, all originating from a public library near my mother's favorite cafe. Bank inquiries under my mother's name popping up where they shouldn't be. At first, I dismissed it as paranoia, a phantom limb of anxiety from my decision to emotionally detach, but the feeling wouldn't go away. I started digging. My job had taught me to be meticulous, to follow the data. I began working late into the night. My home office, lit only by the glow of my monitor. I became a paranoid detective in my own life. Cross-referencing documents, tracking digital footprints, following a trail of breadcrumbs. They were too arrogant, too careless to even realize they were leaving. The moment of chilling clarity came when I found an unsigned letter from my lawyer, buried deep in a digital spam folder. I never checked. It was a draft, a query about a power of attorney, filed under my name, with a signature that was a near-perfect forgery of my own. That's when the warmth truly left me. It wasn't a dramatic shattering, but a slow sigh, leaching, like a body succumbing to hypothermia. The person they thought of as their daughter, their sister, the reliable, forgiving, endlessly patient bank was gone. In her place was an observer, a strategist. I didn't confront them. Confrontation was their arena. They thrived on emotional chaos. On tears and accusations, they could twist and turn back on me. My arena was silence and information. I stopped being a participant in the family drama and became its sole, unseen audience. I installed trackers on their phones, a simple app disguised as a family safety feature I'd gifted them months ago. I had listening devices discreetly planted in their favorite booth at the cafe where they met every Tuesday to complain about me over lattes. The snippets of conversation I gathered were both heartbreaking and clarifying. She'll get over it. She always does. A little fit. And then she'll be writing us a check to apologize. Asterisk. That was my mother. Her voice confident. Asterisk. She's so wrapped up in her work. She won't even notice until it's done. Honestly, it's for her own good. All that stress, we're simplifying her life. Asterisk. That was Chloe. Her voice dripping with self-serving righteousness. They painted a picture of me as a fragile, naive workaholic. They could easily manipulate, and I let them believe in the fiction they had created because it made them sloppy. That's the thing about family who take you for granted. Once they think you'll always forgive them, they stop bothering to hide their knives. And I was watching every single blade they unsheathed, cataloging its size, its shape, its trajectory. I let them walk right into the trap because I was the one who built it. I listened to their whispers. I watched their plans unfold, and I moved my own pieces on the board with silent, meticulous precision. My response was not emotional. It was architectural. I was building a cage around them, and they were happily providing the blueprints. You see, I began, my tone now calm and pedagogical, as if explaining a simple math problem to a pair of struggling students. The trap had 3 parts. I held up a single finger. First, the true legal deed to this house, the ground we are standing on, the foundation my father laid and left to me. And only me was transferred to my anonymous holding company 2 years ago. I did it as a simple asset protection measure. Long before you ever hatched your little scheme, this house, the real one, was insulated from you, from the very beginning. My mother's face twitched. That's not possible. Oh, it is, I said, holding up a second finger, which brings me to part 2. When I discovered your forged power of attorney, I didn't stop it. I let it proceed. Why? Because the documents you created, the ones you thought gave you ultimate control, only granted you access to a decoy title, a ghost. A legal fiction I had my lawyers create specifically for this purpose, a title for a property that looks identical on paper. But isn't this one? I physically anchored the explanation for them, pointing a single, steady finger past Chloe's new car. You see that fence? The one separating my lawn from the empty, weed-choked plot of land next door. They both turned to look, their faces blank, with a confusion that was slowly curdling into fear. That's what you sold. An empty, worthless lot. To a company that I own. I held up a third finger. And third, I laid out my intent with chilling finality. I needed you to go through every single step of your plan. I needed you to believe you were winning. My voice dropped, each word landing like a hammer blow. I wanted the paper trail. I began listing the documented crimes, counting them off on my fingers as I spoke. Forged authorization, fraudulente Repräsentation, a fraudulent sale, tax evasion, on the income you received from that sale. It's all there. Documented, notarized, and filed with the authorities. Chloe's defiance was a fragile thing, and it shattered with a short, nervous laugh that sounded more like a choke. "You're bluffing," she spat, though her eyes darted nervously toward my mother for support. "You wouldn't do that to us. You don't have it in you." That was my cue. I slowly reached into the inner pocket of my coat and pulled out a folded set of documents. The paper was crisp. The official seal of my development firm, embossed in the corner. I didn't have to say a word. I just held it out. Chloe, desperate to call my bluff, snatched it from my hand. Her bravado evaporated as her eyes scanned the first page. The color drained from her face, leaving a pale, sickly canvas for her dawning horror. I watched her read the lines that confirmed everything I had just said. This says the title was transferred 2 years ago," she stammered, looking up at me, her eyes wide with a panic so pure it was almost beautiful, "to the E.V. Holdings Group." "Ah, that's right," I finished for her, my voice as cold and hard as steel. "The house you thought you sold wasn't legally yours to sell. The buyer you sold it to was a controlled entity, an employee of my firm acting on my behalf. And the money you received from that fraudulent sale, the $214,000 you so proudly mentioned, it's been marked, tracked, 9, and is now Exhibit A in a federal investigation." My mother's lips trembled. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. All the fight gone from her body, leaving a shrunken, bewildered old woman in its place. "You wouldn't," she whispered, the words a desperate prayer to a daughter who no longer existed. "You wouldn't send your own family to jail." That was the moment I played my final, most devastating card. You forged my name. You stole my home. You mocked me to my face. And you thought I would come back begging for your mercy. I took out my phone, unlocked it, and pressed play. Their own voices filled the quiet afternoon air. Tinny and cruel, through the small speaker, it was the recording from the cafe, from just a week ago. Chloe's voice times, "She'll lose everything. Let her cry. She's always been weak." My mother's voice, "Laughing times. She'll come crawling back. She needs us. She needs family." The shock on their faces was absolute. They stared at the phone as if it were a venomous snake. Their own treachery, coiling around them. The sound of their casual, confident betrayal was the one thing they couldn't deny. The one thing they couldn't spin. Silence fell between us. Thick and heavy. Only the wind moved, rustling the leaves of the oak trees that lined the driveway, the same trees my father and I had planted. "I'm not sending you to jail," I said, my voice low and final, as I turned off the recording. "You already did that yourselves." By evening, the sirens were singing in the distance, their wail growing closer and closer. I didn't stay to watch them being taken away. There was no victory in that. No satisfaction. I didn't need to see their downfall to know I had won. Their defeat was not the point. My freedom was. Instead, I walked calmly to the gate of the property next door, the supposedly empty lot. There it stood, an exact replica of the house I grew up in. The same design, the same balcony where I used to watch my father leave for work. But this one was newer, stronger, built with better materials and completely untouched by their rot. It was the home I had been building in secret for the last year. While they were busy trying to tear the old one down, This was the ultimate symbol of my victory. I didn't just reclaim what was mine, I rebuilt it. Purified of their influence, I unlocked the brand new front door and stepped inside, breathing in the clean, quiet air. It smelled of fresh paint, new wood, and new beginnings. I wasn't smiling anymore. I didn't need to. Victory isn't always a triumphant shout or a smug grin. Sometimes it's the quiet peace of a home earned through intellect and resolve. Justice, I realized, doesn't always need to shout. Sometimes it is a quiet, meticulously planned, and perfectly executed thing. Some debts can't be repaid in money. But justice pays with precision. Have you ever had to make a clean break to protect your own peace? Cutting ties isn't an act of cruelty. It's an act of survival. Share your story of when you chose precision over poison.